For years, Kevin Spacey wasn't just famous, he was institutional. Awards, prestige, and a screen presence so commanding it felt permanent. He didn't trend for chaotic tabloid noise, he trended for craft. He was the kind of actor directors called when they wanted gravity, when they wanted the camera to believe every word without asking questions. Then the narrative flipped, fast, not a slow leak, not a gentle fade, a hard snap that made it feel like the industry hit delete. One wave of allegations, a few days of headlines, and suddenly the conversation wasn't, "What's his next role?" It was, "How did we not see this coming?" In modern culture, that question is deadly because it doesn't demand a full investigation first. It demands a reaction right now. What makes this story addictive isn't only the scandal, it's the speed of the collapse. Productions go into emergency mode. Publicists go quiet. Partners distance themselves. Projects restructure. The machinery that once protected a star begins protecting itself. And when the machine protects itself, it doesn't move with compassion. It moves with math, risk, optics, reputation, revenue. Here's the second hook. The legal track doesn't move like social media. Public opinion can convict someone in a weekend. Courts move slowly, under strict rules, with outcomes that can surprise people who only followed headlines. That gap between public certainty and legal complexity turns this into a timeline you can't stop watching because every chapter feels like it might rewrite the last one. Tonight, we're rebuilding it all step by step. The peak that made him feel untouchable, the allegations that triggered an industry shutdown, the projects that cut ties, the legal chapters that followed, and the reality that even when a legal chapter closes, a reputation can stay frozen. Because the real question isn't only what happened, the real question is, how does someone go from untouchable to unemployable while the world watches the fall in real time? Before the scandal, Kevin Spacey's career didn't look fragile. It looked fortified. He wasn't simply working, he was winning. He had built a reputation as an elite performer, controlled, intelligent, dangerous on screen, endlessly watchable. In Hollywood terms, he carried the stamp of seriousness. When he walked into a project, the project felt bigger, more adult, more award-friendly, more important. Then came House of Cards, and with it a new kind of power. The show wasn't just popular, it became a symbol of streaming platforms proving they could dominate prestige television. Spacey wasn't only in it, he was part of its identity. That matters because when a performer becomes the face of a platform-defining series, they stop being only talent. They become a business asset, a marketing anchor, a cultural shorthand. At peak, his persona was not messy celebrity. It was authority. He didn't need to be liked. He needed to be respected. The industry treated him like a pillar, reliable for awards conversations, valuable for high-end scripts, and powerful enough to shape how a production was perceived before anyone even watched it. And when someone reaches that level, the career becomes less about auditions and more about ecosystem. Agents, producers, directors, brand partners, press, everyone benefits from the stability of the star. The star becomes a hub. The hub becomes profit. That's why a scandal at this level doesn't just affect one person. It shakes a whole network of decisions and investments. This is also why the peak chapter is essential for retention. When a tabloid star falls, the public shrugs. When a prestige pillar falls, the public leans in, because it challenges the assumption that talent equals safety, that brilliance equals integrity, that an elite reputation means the person must be above ordinary scandal. Part 2 ends with the tension that makes the next chapter hit harder. His career wasn't simply rising, it was locked in, which means the scandal didn't interrupt a climb, it detonated a fortress. When allegations surfaced, the industry reacted like it had rehearsed the scenario. That's the chilling part. Modern entertainment has a crisis protocol. A headline hits, and companies immediately calculate, can we keep the project alive if we remove the risk? Can we survive the backlash if we don't? Can advertisers, partners, and subscribers stomach the noise? This is where the case becomes a study in speed. Studios don't wait for a courtroom conclusion to make business decisions. They make the decision that protects the brand today. If the story is serious enough, distance becomes the safest public statement. Silence becomes strategy. And in that silence, the audience fills the space with assumptions, outrage, and speculation. This phase often includes the most dramatic industry moves, projects that pause production, contracts that get renegotiated, roles that get rewritten, press tours that get canceled, premieres that get reframed. And when a star is removed from a flagship property, it sends a signal louder than any statement. The industry believes the reputational damage is bigger than the cost of rebuilding. It also changes the internet permanently. Search results update. Autocomplete suggestions shift. Explainer videos go viral. Clips get re-edited with new captions. Old interviews are replayed with suspicious music. In the attention economy, the scandal becomes the first chapter people encounter, sometimes before they ever see the performances that made the person famous. And that's how career collapse begins, not with one official verdict, but with the ecosystem withdrawing support. The infrastructure around the star, publicists, partners, award narratives, steps back. Even when no one uses the word blacklist, the silence behaves like one. Part 3 ends on the cruel reality. The punishment arrives early. The industry's sentence is delivered before any judge speaks. And once that sentence is delivered, the next chapter becomes inevitable. Legal proceedings that move slower than culture, while the public treats every delay as if it's another plot twist. After the industry cutoff, the story enters a different universe: law. Law doesn't care about trending topics. It cares about procedure, testimony, and what can be proven under specific rules. This is where the timeline becomes complicated and therefore bingeable, because it introduces uncertainty into a story the internet tried to simplify into a single verdict. Legal systems move slower than culture, and they also speak a different language. Allegation and charge are not the same thing. Dismissed, acquitted, not liable, and insufficient evidence don't mean the same thing either. That gap creates the whiplash. Some viewers interpret legal wins as full vindication, while others separate legal outcome from moral judgment. Either way, the story stays alive because it never resolves in one clean emotional direction. And this is the key insight for an off-camera style breakdown. Legal outcomes and reputational outcomes operate on different clocks. A court can resolve a specific case. It cannot restore the emotional relationship between a celebrity and the public. In fact, the longer a scandal lives in the public conversation, the more it becomes an identity tag, a permanent label attached to the name. Hollywood watches the legal track like a weather forecast, not because it cares about justice less, but because it cares about risk more. Studios and platforms ask, will this story resurface during release week? Will our cast be asked about it on every red carpet? Will our marketing be hijacked by controversy? Will our project be defined by what one person is accused of instead of what the film or show is? And because those questions are expensive, the safest answer is often delay or avoidance. The result is brutal. Even if legal chapters close, the door to prestige work may stay locked because the reputational cost remains. Part 4 ends on a quiet but devastating truth. In modern fame, a court may decide a case, but culture decides a career. Here is where the peak-to-collapse arc hits hardest. The career story doesn't restart just because a legal chapter ends. The entertainment market is not a jury. It's a crowd, a sponsor ecosystem, a press cycle, and an algorithm. Those systems don't require certainty to punish. They require discomfort. After a scandal of this magnitude, the actor's presence becomes a trigger. Every project risks becoming a referendum. Every trailer risks being flooded by comment wars. Every interview risks turning into a cross-examination. Studios hate that. Marketing teams hate that. Co-stars hate that, because they didn't sign up to become spokespeople for someone else's controversy. So the career narrows. Mainstream offers dry up. prestige conversations vanish. Instead of top-tier studio projects, what remains are smaller, less visible options. Projects that can exist outside the loudest media cycle, or productions willing to take the risk because they have less to lose. This is also where consequences stack invisibly. Canceled deals, renegotiated contracts, lost future roles, insurance complications, legal expenses, and reputational clauses that become expensive. Even without a formal ban, the economics can feel like one. And there's another layer. Memory. Audiences don't separate the art from the story easily when the story is heavy. Rewatching old performances becomes complicated. Some viewers can't watch without thinking about allegations. Others watch precisely because it feels like staring at a forbidden chapter of Hollywood history. Either way, the work is no longer just the work. It's a contested symbol. Part 5 ends with the harsh conclusion. In Hollywood, you can lose your career without losing a court case because the industry punishes risk, not only wrongdoing. And once you become high risk, your resume stops opening doors. The final chapter of this story isn't a clean ending. It's a loop, because the internet doesn't file scandals away. It replays them. It turns them into search results, reaction clips, and shorthand. And once a celebrity's name becomes attached to a permanent question mark, the future gets negotiated by the past. That's why the collapse can feel permanent even as time moves on. Each new appearance triggers the same debate. Should he be back? Was he cleared? Does it matter? And debate itself becomes the trap, because debate keeps the scandal alive and keeps the brand radioactive. The loop returns to the hook. Erased overnight. That's the part audiences can't stop watching because it's a warning disguised as entertainment. Fame looks like power, but power depends on trust, and trust is more fragile than talent. So what is the legacy now? In the public mind, it becomes split screen. The performances that once defined prestige on one side, the scandal that rewrote the meaning of the name on the other. And the tragedy is you can't force the public to choose one screen. Both screens exist now, permanently. Final question. You're closer. What does redemption even mean when the damage is larger than any single outcome? Because in the attention economy, a scandal doesn't always end a career with one headline. Sometimes it ends it with a long, quiet freeze, and that freeze is the real collapse. After the headlines fade and the courtrooms go quiet, a different kind of fallout begins. The one that doesn't trend, doesn't break news alerts, but quietly reshapes a legacy. This is the aftershock. For Kevin Spacey, the aftershock wasn't a single event. It was the slow realization that Hollywood had already moved on. Not loudly, not dramatically, but efficiently. New shows filled the prestige slot once occupied by House of Cards. New actors absorbed the roles that once would have landed on his desk. Award seasons continued without his name being mentioned, not because it was banned, but because it had become inconvenient. And this is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Because when industries rewrite history, they rarely announce it. They simply stop referencing certain chapters. The performances still exist, the awards still exist, but the conversation changes. Retrospectives become rare. Celebrations become selective. The narrative shifts from one of the greats to one of the most complicated cases. That's how reputational erasure works in the modern era. Not through deletion, but through silence. Even after legal outcomes that complicated the public narrative, the industry response didn't reverse. Because the fear wasn't legal guilt. The fear was cultural instability. Studios learned a lesson they won't forget. When a scandal becomes bigger than the work no longer matters. And once that equation flips, talent alone can't rebalance it. This is also why comeback attempts feel awkward rather than triumphant. Any return automatically reopens the debate. Interviews become defensive. Coverage becomes skeptical. Instead of, is he good in this role? The question becomes, should he be here at all? And when that question dominates, projects lose oxygen. Part 7 exists to underline the final truth of this timeline. Kevin Spacey didn't just lose roles. He lost narrative control, and in an industry built on storytelling, losing control of your story is the most permanent kind of damage. Courts decide cases, audiences decide memory, Hollywood decides risk. And when all three drift apart, the person at the center is left in limbo, neither fully erased nor fully restored. So the story doesn't end with a verdict. It ends with a question that keeps looping back. If a career is built on trust, what happens when trust becomes negotiable? Because in the age of instant judgment and permanent archives, some falls don't have an ending. They become a reference point.